This is to introduce a game that I'm playing with my friend Tazio. And it's one of my games. It's called Slay With Me. Has kind of elite title design. And I published it first back in 2009. I've continually sort of been redesigning it physically. The game rules as they are fine. This is a popular game of mine. People play it a lot. And I have constant PDF sales for it. And so it's a two-player game. This was way back when I saw some two-player games coming out and said, I don't believe these work. That's not for me. I like the crisscrossing dynamic among people. Two people is too linear. Then I had to go and play Kevin Allen Jr.'s Sweet Agatha with my friend Tim Kopang. And we had a really, really good time. And I said, boink, and wrote one. So anyways, as I say, this is something that kind of took off for me, publishing-wise. And I enjoy playing it periodically myself. You go back and forth, meaning there are two roles, and you switch roles with each session. Each person has their own independent fantasy hero saga proceeding that have no particular need or expectation to crisscross. They just happen to be two of them running simultaneously. The reason I'm talking to you at the moment is because we didn't record the first session. Just pure oversight, crapped out, didn't record it, and it's too bad because he played his hero and I played the interactor. The rules just call them I and you, so there's not even a designated term for them. And they're not really player and game master. Or if they are, then they're a strange construction of them. One of my frustrations with talking or showing this game is that the observer can't tell what is freely improvised versus what is a constraint that's being met. The rules have extraordinarily specific constraints on talking, and they're not set where they're ordinarily assumed to be in most role-playing. So what looks to you like me kind of spitballing and saying, ooh, well, if you do that, well, I'll do that, I'll get you back, is actually meeting a constraint rather than just me, freely throwing it in. And sometimes what looks like must have been dictated turns out instead to have been freely thrown in. So it's real tricky for an observer to understand how we're talking the way we're talking. So anyways, that is my overly long intro. What happened in that first session? Tazio introduced his character. He did not use one of the listed starting templates. There is the option to make your own, so he did. And he is playing a floating lich with a weird glowing crown and who seems not to have his phylactery because it has been stolen, lost, something. And so he is basically a very vulnerable lich. If his body is destroyed, that's the end of that for him. So you describe your character a little, and you set a goal, and you have chosen a location. And he had chosen the lichen-encrusted remains of the lichen-covered ruins of the lunar citadel. And he said that he was after, what on earth was it? He had a cool goal that he was after. Now, my job was to determine what this citadel looks like and to set the standards for choosing from a list, standards for a monster and for a lover, who may or may not be the same character. It's totally up to you if they are or not. And various details about them that have some numerical standards for play. You build a little dice tower, each of you, as you play. And then at a certain point, then the numbers are compared, both the totals and also a specific internal structuring. That particular stopping point where you look at the numbers isn't play. You're stopping and you look and you say, okay, this sets the standards or certain constraints on what is to happen from now on, which doesn't use dice. So, and then at the end, then you alter your character based on decisions and dice that have been employed, and so your character is somewhat changed. The big issue, too, is what you do regarding the lover character. Wide open options. There's no constraints on what you choose to do, but there are consequences of what you choose to do. Okay, what happened? Well, as it turned out, there were all sorts of shadowy beings, a horde of them, who had ruined the Lunar Library, much to Neral's dismay, wanting to use this library. Furthermore, that one of the librarians, women, turned out to be very helpful to him and impressed him with her dedication, to the library situation. What had I chosen about this lover? Well, first of all, that it was forbidden for her to be with him. She was bound to the library. This was an interesting one, in that you can choose whether they're knowledgeable or helpless. And I dislike usually choosing helpless, although it can be very useful in its way. But having a helpless character who's not a load is important. And I was able to do it this time. I didn't want her to be like another powerful sorceress or somebody who was the key for his success or something. So I chose helpless and then had to have her be very competent in her own sphere. So that was important. That she was open-hearted and non-manipulative lover, and just because we're talking about, a lover librarian, well, she was quiet about it, but she was not innocent. She was wanton. She was definitely, on board from the get-go in terms of her attraction to this, granted, floating, skeletal, whacked out, hero. So anyway, the battle with the shadows proceeded. And as it turns out, he took the lover, whose name was Sa, S-S-A, with him as kind of a buddy, partner, lover. There are some trippy effects of what physical and emotional union between a floating, almost fleshless lich and the spirit of a lady librarian might look like. Fortunately, Tazio is an amazing artist, and I'm sure we will see the results of that sooner or later. Well, anyway, so that was his adventure. And then we recorded the second session, where I made up a hero as well, and we reversed roles and began my hero's adventures, as you'll see.